everybody. Welcome back to our stage. So wanted to thank John again for that excellent keynote address. The programs are, again, that largest source of non-dilutive funding that's available to small businesses, but variations between agency requirements, knowing what to focus on in your technical narrative, and understanding how to create a solid proposal can be really mystifying and sometimes just outright confusing. So to address that issue, I'd like to introduce our first panel for the day, Keys to Creating a Strong SBIR and STTR Proposal Package, moderated by Dana Catron. So you did meet Dana very briefly earlier today, but Dana serves as the Director of Strategic Operations and SBIR Program Director for Arrowhead Center, where she oversees Arrowhead Center's SBIR Assistance Program in MFAST and also supports strategic planning, operations, grants, written communication, and program development. She also serves as Arrowhead Center's Northern New Mexico liaison, where she represents the organization at events and functions, serves on advisory councils, presents on programmatic initiatives, and performs outreach. Dana received her bachelor's degree in animal science from Washington State University and a master's and a PhD currently in progress in rhetoric and professional communication from New Mexico State University. Dana's going to be joined by panelists Dr. Bill Goodman, Jim Greenwood, Mariann Johnston, and Meg Stout. They will discuss the elements of a strong proposal package, some knowledge and tips and tricks on crafting your proposal, and things that people need to know when looking at these unique funding opportunities. Dana and the panel, welcome to the stage and take it away.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction, Del. I'm really excited to kind of echo what Del said. We'll cover key elements to consider when creating a strong SBIR or STTR proposal package. You'll hear this reiterated throughout the day. While SBIR and STTR awards are arguably the best and one of the only sources of non-dilutive funding, or a lot of people say equity-free funding, for early stage technologies, they can be really confusing to navigate, especially for first-time applicants. One of the primary sources of confusion is, while it may seem like there's only two programs, right, SBIR and STTR, each agency has nuances and differences in their proposal requirements and processes that equate to there being more like 12 different programs to navigate. So each agency, you can kind of consider them as their own program. And then when you throw STTR into the mix, that's even more programs. And then if you add to that different service components within the large agencies, for example, DoD, they've got the Navy, the Air Force, the Army. It can be really, really confusing and intimidating to navigate these programs. However, we don't want that to discourage you from exploring them and applying to these funding opportunities. In this panel, we'll cover a broad range of information, from tips and tricks for creating a strong proposal package, how to stand out during the review process, how to build a strong team, and more. As a reminder, if you have questions that come up during the panel, please just drop them into the chat and we'll have time to address those towards the end of the session. It is now my pleasure to introduce our panel members for this session. And going in alphabetical order, Dr. Bill Goodman is president of Goodman Technologies, LLC. Dr. Goodman is a successful SBIR awardee based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Jim Greenwood is president of the Greenwood Consulting Group and is one of the foremost experts on the SBIR and STTR programs, having assisted on and reviewed hundreds of proposals. Mariann Johnston is the team leader for technology engagement and entrepreneurship at Los Alamos National Laboratory's Feynman Center for Innovation, where she spearheads efforts to commercialize nanotechnologies and engage with startups in the tech commercialization space. And finally, we have Meg Stout. Meg leads efforts across the Navy's Underseas Systems Directorate, which has an active SBIR and STTR portfolio of 50 topics. And Meg has been active in the SBIR and STTR efforts for about 2 decades. So again, we're so excited to have all of you here today to join this session. At this time, what I'd like to do is let the panel members go into a little bit more detail about themselves and their experience with the SBIR and STTR programs, and then we'll dive right into the panel discussion. So Dr. Goodman, would you mind kicking us off and telling us a little bit more about yourself and your experience with SBIR?
Yes, thanks Dana for the introduction. Glad to be here supporting New Mexico FAST, the Arrowhead Center. The first Phase 1 SBIR one was back in the year 2000, and there's been 50 of them since then. I think we're on our 17th Phase 2 award. We have a sequential Phase 2 award from the Army. That's very nice. Goodman Technologies is a 4-year-old startup in the new space, aerospace, and defense genres. And SBIR has generated $5.4 million in seed fund since our inception.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Goodman. Jim, would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. It's Jim Greenwood, president of Greenwood Consulting Group. If I look somewhat familiar, I'm a native of New Mexico. Actually managed the business incubator in Los Alamos for quite a while and was co-director of the Small Business Development Center up there. I've been involved in SBIR STTR since the programs began. SBIR going back to 1982 when I was an applicant. I was a fresh out of grad school, a newbie at a engineering consulting firm, and the boss said there's something called SIBR and we ought to be in it. So I, being a young whippersnapper that wanted to show the boss that I understood his direction, I wrote one of our early proposals, a complete disaster, I might add. Later on, I morphed into kind of an economic development role and was approached by First San and then I was working for faculty members, staff members at the labs, and entrepreneurs in SBIR STTR, and we developed workshops based on that. We still do workshops, do a lot of webinars, but we also are doing a lot of coaching and one-on-one consulting these days. We're part of the outreach program of the Department of Energy for newcomers to that agency's SBIR program. And I know this is hard, guys, but as a native New Mexican, I actually have a University of Texas client. I know how hard that can be for New Mexicans to do, but I have enjoyed working with the folks on University of Texas related SBIR STTR projects. Work with the University of Tennessee, PTAC, the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, with their outreach program, and then just work individually with some companies. For example, right now I'm coaching a company applying for direct to Phase 2 at the National Institutes of Health. So very experienced. A message, overriding theme I would put on our presentation today is you can do this, guys. I understand from Dana, a lot of you are newcomers. You can do this. Newcomers can succeed in this program, and newcomers from New Mexico can succeed in this program. Bill is a living example of that, even though you're in the hinterlands of New Mexico and may feel when you still have to put USA on your license plates to remind people you're part of the country, that you really, the entrepreneurs of the state typically shine quite brightly in the eyes of the agencies in the SBIR STTR programs.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Jim. We're so happy to have you here today. Mariann, you offer a really unique perspective being affiliated with a national lab. Can you tell us a little bit more about your role at LANL? Oh, and I know she was having some technical issues, and looks like she's frozen. So we'll come back to Mariann. So going to Meg. Meg, we're also so excited to have somebody from the Navy SBIR program represented on this panel. You also offer, a really unique perspective. Can you expand on your role a little bit and what you hope attendees might gain from this session?
So what I do as one of my many jobs in my office is manage our Sbir portfolio, SBIR, Sttr, and also RIFs, etc. So I like to think of the portfolio as a multi-year portfolio. So we've got about $70 million going on at any given time. And so each year we poll our community and say, what are the topics that you think would be really good as an SBIR or Sttr topic? Something that's out there about 5 years, something that if it works, it'd be super cool, and if it fails, you wouldn't die. And something that you're willing to not work on because we're going to carve that out for a small business. And we usually have about 15, 20 topics come through. We winnow those down to the most important ones for us. And then about a year later, they pop out as things for people to look at. I will mention, I saw a question about how do you find out what people are looking for. Look at the open BAAs. Right now, the Navy has their 21.1 cycle just opened yesterday or Monday, I think I started getting phone calls. So NavySBIR.com website, and I'm sure the other agencies have websites like that. I just don't know them off the top of my head. And that gives you a chance to see what are the topics that they've got out there, and they've got contact information for people you can talk to during the pre-BAA timeframe to find out, is this something you would even be interested in bidding in on? And typically, I think that the folks you're talking to are very open to helping you understand what exactly they're hoping to see in your proposal. That's very important to listen to that. So I don't know, we've been doing this for so long, I forget what I've known and what I've forgotten. But look forward to the rest of the panel. Thanks, Dana.
Great, thank you, Meg. And let's okay, so Mariann is still troubleshooting. So we'll just go ahead and jump right in. As you can see, we've got a really, really exciting lineup of speakers to tackle this really important topic today. So preparing an SBIR or Sttr proposal package can be really intimidating, but there's lots of tools and resources and mentors available to assist you as you pursue this. Dr. Goodman, what factors do you think turn small businesses off from engaging in these programs? And what would be your advice for a first-time applicant trying to get their foot in the door?
Well, I believe that if you've never done business with the government before, there are a number of things, a number of steps that you have to do. You have to get registered in system for award management. You have to get a DUNS number. You have to get a cage code from the Defense Logistics Agency. There's a lot of things you have to do before you even propose. And then I think what happens is people get fearful because there are a lot of instructions. There's a lot to read. There's a lot of I's to dot and T's to cross. And I know that fear is the #1 thing that can destroy the psychology of a business person, an entrepreneur. And if you can just see past the fear, which is always in the future, it's just a fake feeling anyhow, and just, read and understand, and then reach out to mentors or New Mexico Fast or your PTACs that every state has, and ask questions, you'll get all the help you need to write a successful proposal.
Right, and I guess to kind of echo that too, and we'll be again reiterating this throughout the day, there's a lot of support organizations out there to help you as you navigate this. And for example, New Mexico Fast is one of several FAST sites throughout the country who our mission is to provide that level of support. Several of the other FAST sites are here today as well. You can see them in the expo hall, and one of the things I always tell people is we're happy to connect you to the most appropriate point of contact in whatever state you are in, so you can get that assistance. Jim and Meg, is there anything you'd like to add to what Dr. Goodman was saying before we move on to the next?
Go ahead, Meg.
Oh, I think as I was listening, I thought one of the things that I don't think people understand, STTRs are a little bit harder because you do have to reach out to a research organization to partner with you, and I think, is it 40% that they need to have? I usually don't have to worry my head about that because anybody who hasn't met the proper metric gets screened out before we ever get to see the proposals. But it's a little harder, but because of that, you have less competition. And one of the nice things about STTRs is, at least in Navy, because you're partnering with a university, they often say, can we just do topics that aren't going to be classified for phase 1 and phase 2? So if you're a new company, you might not have all of those clearances in place and facility clearances, et cetera. So STTRs are a nice place to look first, I would say, because that gives you a chance to play in a less crowded pond, I would say. Over to you, Jim.
Yeah, I would certainly echo that, and that's one reason why I encourage people in Sbir STTR is you don't compete against universities, you don't compete against federal laboratories, you don't compete against large industry, and frankly, the awards are based on merit, not on politics. So it is it's about as clean of a program as you're going to get, and about a level of a playing field as you're going to get as a small company. One thing I would caution people is look out for some of my fellow consultants who start guaranteeing you that if you'll hire them to write your proposal, you will win. They guarantee it. There's no guarantee here, guys. I review for National Science Foundation, and it's interesting when you're on the reviewer side, you really see how human that process is. There is no way to determine in advance who's going to win and who's not going to win. What you do is you put your best foot forward and increase your chances as much as possible and try to make it as easy as possible for the reviewer to understand what you're doing and feel good about it. So just be careful about those that guarantee success. And on the other hand, don't go to them and say, will you write my proposal? Because you shouldn't be hiring people to write these things. You should be writing them. This is your proposal. It's your innovation. It's your baby. You need to own that proposal. And frankly, you need to learn how to write a good proposal so that you're not dependent on outside reviewers and writers perpetually.
Great, thanks. And Jim, kind of to piggyback on talking about reviews, the SBIR and STTR programs are obviously very competitive solicitations designed to move innovative technologies to the marketplace. But one of those first hurdles is once an application is submitted, how do you convince a reviewer that you know what you're doing and that you have the capacity to successfully complete the project? I mean, these awards are pretty substantial in terms of funding. So Jim, you've reviewed many proposals. What are some critical factors that can help somebody stand out when a reviewer is going through submissions?
Okay, excellent question, Dana. And the main thing is get specific and detailed in your proposal. I see way too many generalizations, hand waving, give us the money, trust us, we know what we're doing. They don't trust you. They don't know who you are, unless you're just lucky and they just happen to know you from a previous life or something. They don't know you, so they look to your work plan and say, does this Goodman guy really know what the heck he's doing? And they read that and they go, wow, look at the detail, look at the specifics, look at the thought he's given this. I don't know this guy, but it looks like he really got a good head on his shoulders. He's thought this through, he knows what he's doing. That's going to improve. Instead, if you come in and say, I'm brilliant, I've got a PhD, I've done a lot of work, I'm really famous, just give me the money, they don't know who you are, and they don't trust you. They want to see the detailed work plan of what you're going to do. I recommend avoiding words like simple, straightforward, and the one I really dislike is when I see commercialization. This will be easily commercialized. Generally, when I see that, it suggests someone who's not done any commercialization to understand that even what ought to be straightforward and simple is seldom so. Also avoid to be determined. I still remember one I reviewed, and it said our principal investigator is to be determined. So it's like we don't know who's going to run the project and who's going to do most of the work. But again, trust us, just give us the money. They're not going to do it. So be very specific. A key word, in my opinion, is explain how you're going to do the work. A lot of people explain what they're going to do, but people oftentimes will not take the next step and get into the detail of describing how they're doing it. And that's where you win the reviewer over a lot of cases.
And Jim, kind of along those lines, is there anything that would, as a reviewer, make or break a proposal? Are there any things that should absolutely not ever be done, that you'd immediately throw away that proposal? We've got a lot of first-time applicants here, and yeah. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Sure, and I'd love to hear Meg's comments on this, because I bet she's seen some real doozies on that. But the most common one is you don't follow the instructions. And the instructions say do not exceed 20 pages, and there's your 22nd page. Well, the instructions clearly say 20 pages, and if you give us more than 20 pages, we're going to throw it out. And that's an easy one. Or font size, margin width. NSF wants the second paragraph of your abstract to start with a certain phrase. I mean, you just got to do these things, because my stepson uses the term the rules police will get you. The rules police are people in these agencies whose job it is to see whether you followed the rules or not, whether you followed the directions. So if you don't do that, that's very quickly you get canned. And as Meg said earlier, she never even sees those get worse. But again, let me defer to Meg and see what kind of horror story she might have.
Actually, it's been my pleasure to mostly see really good proposals. As you said, the times when they get the font size wrong or they get the margin size wrong, they just get screened out before we ever have the pleasure of reading them. There are times, don't want to get specific, even though it's been years and years, but there's times when, like, very rarely, either somebody says, hey, I've talked to the local YMCA and they've promised me that I can use their pool, or something like that is not a confidence-inspiring comment. It doesn't mean that it's not a good proposal, just that there's being professional. You're dealing with people who are used to big contractors and are looking to hand you $2 million. So think about that. I mean, obviously, phase one is only a few hundred, 100K, 150K to start with, and then, but it's we're looking for somebody that we think is going to be able to go all the way through phase two. So somebody who doesn't look like they can do that, someone who hasn't done the homework. If you've put in your write-up, this is the system we're planning to transition to, and here's the fact file for that system, we want to see you actually have a clue what that system is. But I would just say the standard out there is pretty high. So, and we have no control. Actually, when we get the list and we find out that our topic has garnered 30 proposals, we're like, oh no. And we'll have some really good proposals sometimes that just didn't make the top tier. Not because they weren't good proposals, but they just weren't as stunning as the ones that did make the top tier. And so it really is a meritocracy, as I think Jim was saying.
Well, and so kind of on that note, Meg, what kind of elements in a proposal would elevate it to that top tier status from the agency perspective?
Yeah, it'll be different for each topic, because the topic is going to be very specific And that's where you want to take advantage of the pre-BAA timeframe to contact the TPOC or the author of the topic and find out exactly what are they looking for. And I can't answer that even for all, I think I've got 6 topics out there right now. I wouldn't be willing to give one answer even just for my own, much less everybody else's across all government. So talk to them, find out what they are saying is most important to them. And I would say maybe stepping back, we entertain visits from industry so that they can tell us about things. Again, this is something where we'd want you to do your homework first so that you're coming in with a solution that would apply to our portfolio. But sometimes we'll write up topics based on those industry visits. It's never a guarantee you're going to get it.
Right.
But there's some work you can do ahead of time to even shape what topics get put onto the slate going forward.
Right. And maybe Dr. Goodman, I mean, you've put together many proposal packages. Do you have any advice in terms of when you go to talk to that TPOC or talk to somebody at the agency from a small business perspective? Any tips to consider?
Yes, indeed. So you're only going to get about anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes to talk because they're inundated with people that are asking questions, and they'll get you will want to have thoroughly looked at the topic, read the references that are often provided with the topic to get an understanding, some insight what the customer is looking to achieve, and then you can go with them when you're on your phone call and say, you know, here's what I understand, here's what I've read. Can you confirm that this is what you are looking for? And sometimes what happens is the person who becomes the technical point of contact is not the one who wrote the topic in the first place. And so they may have their own source of pain that they're trying to, you know, find a solution, a remedy for. So you want to have your questions lined up, but don't ask them, you know, would this be a good proposal for you? Is this what you're going to, you know, they're not going to give you an answer to that. They're not allowed to.
Right. Okay, great. And I think we lost issues. So, Mariann, can you hear us? Let's see. Well, I think we'll just go on to the next question, and then we'll see if her internet stabilizes here. All right, so the SBIR and STTR programs are obviously a very excellent avenue for small businesses to validate and commercialize innovative technologies and succeed in the market, right? The kind of end goal is commercialization. However, many small businesses, especially first-time applicants, struggle with how to capture this in their budget. This is something that comes up very, very often with clients we work with, and so we wanted to address this during this panel session. So Meg, as someone who is looking for solutions to challenges identified by the Navy, what are some critical factors small businesses should consider when they are creating their budget?
So when you're looking at your budget in context of your proposal, do think about what happens if I win this? What happens if I win it and I get the phase 2 nod? And then do I have a future vision that is consistent with getting phase 3 success? So it's useful if you've thought through that whole journey before you put things down. When it comes to the phase 1 proposal, I'm not usually looking too terribly hard at the money part of it. I just assume people are going to propose to spend all the money that they can wring out of it. So I would assume you come in with something that says you're going to take about 140K or whatever it might be at the time you're proposing. But if you have, for example, in your personnel, if you've really talked about this team you've got and specific subject matter experts that you're going to be bringing, I may look at your cost proposal to see, did you actually include funding for those people? So if you have talked about this Wamidine consultant and then there's no money for that Wamidine consultant in your budget, then that's not, you might get lucky, maybe they won't look, but they might look. So please make sure your budget reflects the proposal that you're putting in. Now, when it comes to a phase 2, DCMA, at least for defense things, gets involved to see, do you have an adequate accounting system for them to award a phase 2? And at least under our rules, you won't get that phase 1 option unless DCMA gives the thumbs up that your accounting system is adequate. As an evaluator, when I've had to do the technical analysis report, I have to crawl through and say, are your trips all justified? Are your costs for your trips reasonable? Is your labor mix appropriate? And we're pretty easy on the SBIRs because it's very company specific. But if you have one person who's pulling down a king's ransom per hour, that might actually trip something for people. So this is definitely something where you can reach out to the resources that are available to get guidance on how to make sure that your cost proposals are looking reasonable, are within the realm of industry, the broad range of industry expectations. So power to you. And just know we do actually look at that stuff.
We do, yeah. It is important. Well, so Dr. Goodman, you're a small business. If you can think back to maybe your very first SBIR when you were first putting together that budget, how was that process? Did you kind of struggle with it? Was it easy? Did you reach out to somebody for help? How did you?
I'll tell you. I can't remember that far back. That was 20 years ago. But I can tell you about one that I just did this past week for the Navy, which was 4 years out because there's a 2-year base period and a 2-year option period. And they're both for $1 million. And there are a number of vendors and suppliers and subcontracts. Some of these are prime contractors. And all these things take a lot of time and effort to pull together. So I actually start with this. I want to know, number one, what are the objectives that I want to achieve? Number two, how am I going to achieve those objectives? What is the work plan? What am I going to do to achieve those objectives? Then I have to define the task that fits into the work plan. Okay. The next thing I do is I put together a Gantt chart, which is a fancy word for a schedule, and see how long it's going to take to execute each of those tasks. Because once I have that schedule, then I know, what manpower do I have to assign to each of those tasks to meet the objective. And now we're going to give the objective a new name. It's called a milestone.
All right, sorry about that, Dr. Goodman, if you want to continue.
Yeah, I was talking about the Gantt chart and objectives, and I think the last thing I was saying is your objectives that the tasks are going to fulfill and result in a delivery is now called a milestone. And a milestone is one of the things that the government technical point of contact and representative will use to pay you for your work. Now, once I have that labor mix, then I can start assigning people's hours by month at their rate, and now I have a budget that's starting to build up. So I have my labor, and I have my cost of materials that I have to buy. I have my subcontractors. I have my consultants. But here's one that's very important. It's your other direct costs. So a lot of the stuff that I do has to do with materials and hardware, and you got to ship these things. And so, you know, shipping a pallet with a couple $100 pounds from across the country can be a couple $1,000s. Now, if you don't propose that, you know, that may not be an acceptable cost. And what you'll have to do to recover that cost is probably subtract some of your labor. So you don't, you know, you have to really spend a lot of time on a budget. But yeah, the first one, I wish I could remember what it's like, but I can tell you this, it hasn't gotten any easier in 20 years.
Right. And if you review proposals and applications, are there any tips you can offer? I'm sure you've seen really great budgets and really bad budgets. Are there common mistakes people tend to make when putting together a budget for the first time? Would you mind expanding a little bit on that?
Sure. Yeah. First, I'll echo what I heard Meg say, which is if the maximum is 150,000 for that agency or 200,000, there's no advantage being under that number. This is not a cheap proposal wins. So feel free to bid right up to the limit. Now, I would also suggest not bidding over the limit. I was given a proposal to review that had failed, and the company wasn't clear why, and I reviewed it. It wasn't bad a proposal, but I got to the budget, and that budget period, the agencies had a maximum of $150,000. This company had put in a proposal for $150,000.11. The cost proposal clearly showed an extra 11 cents. So if the rules police wanted to be tough, they may have thrown that thing out on 11 cents. So it would be, you know, terrible for that to happen to you. Also, don't, if the max is 150, don't bid or don't plan to bid $150,000 worth of research. You don't have that much, because the 150 is not just to do the research, but also to pay some of your bills, some of your costs being in business, and have a little profit or fee in there. And you may be saying profit or fee. I can get profit. Yes, all the agencies allow profit. Some call it fee, but all allow profit of about 7%. You always ask for that money, because that's the only free money you get from the government that doesn't have any restrictions on it. You can do whatever you want to with that money. So it's the best money you're ever going to get.
Right. I think that's great advice. And kind of going back to that comment, and you know, that 11 cents could have broken that full proposal package, which, as we all know, takes a really long time to put together. And I think one of the things we really stress, and we cannot reiterate this enough, is just follow the instructions on the application.
Yes.
There's a lot of resources available to help make sure that you are hitting every single point that the agency wants, and to make sure that you are following those instructions. So I think if you join our New Mexico Fast booth or go to our website, we have a lot of those resources available to anybody, regardless of which state you're in. So we want to make sure that you're not getting kicked out of the running because of a technicality like 11 cents. So going on, one of the things that comes up pretty often too, in regards to putting together a really strong package, is the team. So building a strong team with relevant partners, it's very critical, I think, when you're putting together a proposal package, regardless of the agency. Could one of you maybe expand on a little bit more what small businesses should consider and know before engaging either with another organization or a potential team member? Are there particular items that should be discussed? Are there things that should be considered? Maybe Meg, from an agency standpoint, if you could touch on, you know, how important is that team? Is that going to make or break a proposal? So I don't know who wants to kind of kick it off, but
yeah, I'd be happy to, because I've been seeing those questions. We do not require that you have a team. It's really what is the benefit of the proposal. Now, if One of the things that is really powerful is if you happen to have teamed with a former small business. We have occasionally people who have succeeded too much and now they're not a small business anymore. Either they got acquired or they just grew too big. We often really like the kind of work that they bring, but we can't do a Sbir with them. So occasionally if a small business has teamed with one of these former, if you will, small business graduates, we'll see that as quite a strength. But you don't need to team. And sometimes we actually have problems when people will team. One of our prime, well, you've got Raytheon, you've got Lockheed Martin, you've got Northrop Grumman, other big primes that work on Navy stuff at least. That can actually be a problem. Two things that come to mind. One is if you team with a big industry partner and you haven't teamed with the component that we actually work with, it might still be, say, Raytheon, but if it's not the part of Raytheon that we work with, that really isn't giving you any benefit in our eyes. The other thing that can be a problem is sometimes if you team with the large business that we work with a lot, it can cause us a huge legal problem because now we have to go through and firewall and recuse and go to legal counsel. So the way we tend to handle that when we anticipate that is we'll just reach out to our large business and say, could you please not team with anybody for this topic? Because we want the winner to team with you in phase 2, but we don't want to cause legal problems during phase 1. So it really will depend on the topic and the audience that you're going for. I personally don't think you need to team as long as your technology is very strong. But there's absolutely no downside if you team properly.
Right. And this is, I think, one of the key kind of areas where agency differences come into play, right? So maybe Jim, could you talk about some of the other agencies do look at teams pretty critically? I'm thinking NIH in particular, but maybe could you talk a little bit about some of the other agencies and what you've seen in terms of teaming?
Sure. Yeah. And I get the question a lot. Do I have to be a PhD to apply for Sbir, Sttr, or to be the principal investigator? And the short answer is no. But when you apply to places like National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundation, even Department of Agriculture, most of the reviewers are academics of the PhD level, and they see this as a research proposal. And if you do not have adequate, in their minds, educational background and experience, then that can be a detriment. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't win with those agencies with a PI or with a team that does not have a PhD on it. But I oftentimes encourage them to bring a PhD on the team. An example is you can go to a retired faculty member, bring them in as a consultant, sometimes for a relatively modest portion of the funding, and bring their credibility. But you're not just buying their resume, you also bring them in and you bring in their experience and their knowledge and the school of hard knocks that they bring of experience that can be beneficial to the project. So I would encourage that. I always recommend you look at the proposal from the reviewer's standpoint, from Meg's standpoint, and say, what bases would she want to see covered? And if there's a base that's not covered, then that's a hole in your team, and you got to try to figure out how to fill it. And you can do that with consultants and subcontractors as well as part-time employees if you need to do that. I will tell you it works a lot better if you go to an entity that has previously been on an Sbir, Sttr, because if you go to Sandia and you talk about SBIR, they know immediately what you're talking about. They understand the program, and they've got some of the boilerplate in place that they're going to have to do to be a subcontractor on your project. You go to another entity that's, and I'll just pick on Eastern New Mexico University. I don't know that ENMU has ever been a sub on an SBIR. Go to ENMU and say, I want you to sub. They may just give you that baffled look, like, what the heck are you talking about? And that means you're going to have to start with them, make them understand the program, understand their role, and try to get their lawyers and their contracting people to understand what they've got to do. Could be a much bigger effort. Final comment real quickly. I have seen some real disasters where and these are primarily STTRs, where small company wants to bid, and they just go out and they find some university they've never worked with before, and they jump in on a project, and they get the project, and halfway through it, they're not understanding, they're not agreeing with each other, they have different cultures, they have different attitudes, and the thing crashes. The project just plain crashes. So be very careful if you jump into a relationship with a new entity you've not worked with before. Try to get to know them as much as you can before you're actually committing to that relationship, if you will.
Right. And how long, you know, I imagine, and I've heard horror stories. We work pretty closely with both national labs here, where somebody, a small business, will come to the lab a week before the proposal is due and say, "Hey, I need a research institution to partner with on this STTR." Well, you know, obviously that's a no-brainer. You don't want to go a week before, but what would it be an appropriate time frame, do you think, to start building those relationships with, you know, especially for STTR when you're required to have that research institution, but even if you want to bring on a subcontractor or somebody else to your, you know, into your proposal package, what would your advice be for engaging with them?
I mean, I guess the best answer is years in advance. You want to build that relationship years in advance. But here, you know, Meg puts out a topic now in December, and she wants a proposal in February. You don't have that time. But
right.
If you have been building a relationship, then that's nice, and you can maybe springboard off of that. Otherwise, and as soon as you can, you now know that the DoD solicitations are on the street. You ought to be looking at them tonight. If there's a topic of interest, be thinking about who would be as part of your team if you're at particularly STTR, and reach out now, particularly with the holidays coming up. You really need to reach out now, and at least you could build a relationship over the next, 30, 45 days, and hopefully get a feel for whether or not you want to work with these people, whether they want to work with you. And also, in the middle of the holiday, can you get the university or the federal lab bureaucracy to get everything done that they need to do? One tip I'll give you that helps there is, at least with the granting agencies, the subcontractor has to put in a budget that looks very much like the overall contractor budget, the lead small businesses budget. And a lot of times there's not time to get the accounting people in the university to put together that subcontractor budget. If you can just get them to put it on Excel, put it on a spreadsheet, email it to you, you can put it on the forms for them, and then you attach it to the proposal because it's your proposal, and you don't have to have them working the forms and trying to get them back to you in the right place and so on. So that can speed things up a little bit.
Right. Okay. And Dr. Goodman, from the small business perspective, do you have any advice or comments? Have you partnered with research institutions or subcontractors?
Yes. So I've partnered with universities, and as Jim just said, you want to, any entity that's larger than a small business does things slower than a small business. Okay, and the bigger the organization, the slower it is. So even though the large system primes, as an example, have dedicated SBIR people to work with, they still have to send things up through multi-levels of management for approval. You know, as an example, to get a letter of support for your proposal. And in terms of, say, universities, so a university has an outreach program for partnering with companies. It's usually called an Office of Scientific Research. There may be special agreements that you have to put in place in advance that are not like your confidentiality agreements or non-disclosure agreements, but actually how you will share intellectual property and things like that. So, and they're all different, but there are a lot of similarities. So, you know, you definitely want to give yourself a couple weeks in advance to, number one, give them time to write a proposal, but number two, then to cost it out and send it into their system so that they have someone that actually signs off on the proposal the same way you as a CEO, would do that. So, there's a process. Just go through the process, and don't procrastinate. Procrastination is a form of fear. It's a scarcity mindset. There's not enough time, and the reason people procrastinate is because they don't want to experience the pain right now. So just experience a little pain right now, go through the extra footwork, and take the effort, do the actions, and then you'll get a great gain to replace that pain once you're a winner.
Right. And speaking of procrastination and putting together one of these packages, a lot of times we get questions about how long does it take to put together a phase one. I can let you know from our side, our experience with clients who are doing it for the first time, we generally say give it 100 hours at least to put together a full proposal package. I don't know, Meg or Jim or Dr. Goodman, is that around what you've seen in terms of timing?
If you
lots of variables.
Go ahead, Jim.
Go ahead, Bill. No, I'm just going to say there are lots of variables. If it's your first time, it's going to take a lot longer. If you got a subcontractor, it's going to take longer. If you got a consultant, it's going to take longer. Just the more complicated and the earlier on, and the more you're unsure of your approach and the team, and you're having a hard time finding a resource, and it can take 100 hours easily. Others, I've seen people knock out a successful proposal in a weekend, and they just, everything was in place, and they had it kind of put together in the back of their mind, and they're a pretty good writer, and they just kind of pulled it all together. So it's a lot of variability, but for me, your 100 hours is probably a good rule of thumb for people to start with.
Okay. Yeah, and Dr. Goodman.
I'd like to add to what Jim said. So yeah, if you've done several proposals, you're going to have some boilerplate already done. Your equipment and facilities, your key people, perhaps your commercialization transition plan, and of course you're going to tailor it to the topic area that you're working on. But yeah, if you're a first timer doing this, or you haven't done very many, or you've done a couple but you haven't been successful yet, one mindset that you must have is SBIR is not a business. You'll spend all the profit that you might receive if you win writing the proposal, okay? And your proposal, once it becomes a contract, all it's going to cover is basically your non-recurring engineering costs. So, thinking about this from a business perspective, you have to have the appropriate level of expectations. But again, as Jim said, if you've done these before and you're experienced at it, then maybe it's 40 hours, okay, or it could even be 20 hours. But to start, first couple times, I'd really plan on the 100, like Dana has said.
Right. And again, know that there are organizations out there that will help you through that that entire process. So I think we've got about a little over 10 minutes left. So I'm going to go ahead and start asking some of the questions that have been coming in from the audience. The first being kind of going back to proposal development, right? So you're putting together this proposal package. What are some of the items that should be included in the proposal to have a chance at being competitive? So, for example, preliminary data, tables of competitors, CAD drawings, etc.
Preliminary data is going to be very important at National Institutes of Health and quite important at National Science Foundation. And NIH dances around this in their instructions and says basically you can include it, but it's not required. There are an awful lot of NIH reviewers that say if I don't see preliminary data, I'm not interested in your proposal. So I would make preliminary data a must with NIH. Another key thing is that work plan. Again, it's got to be the detailed discussion of what you're going to do. Too many people will go on page after page after page about background and what they've already done, and then they get to telling you what they're going to do with $200,000, and it's trust me, just give me the money. I'm brilliant. I'll do good stuff with it. Well, they don't trust you because you haven't told them what you're going to do with it.
And I would echo what Jim says there. Navy doesn't think of it in terms of preliminary data per se, but if you come in and say, we propose to study to find out if anything can be done, that's far less compelling than we've already done something and we think that this could really apply to the problem at hand. So different language, but similar concept.
And Dr. Goodman, are there any tips you have in terms of what you like to include in your proposals that has been really successful?
Yeah, I want to agree with my colleagues here. People, the SBIR STTR is America's seed fund. And the government here is acting as an investor. And in the last couple of years, the government's even gone to the extent to have outside experts, venture capitalists, investor bankers, things like that, review a commercialization transition plan because they want to see their investment be fulfilled. And so if you're going to convince somebody to that they should give you money, then they want to see something. And, having pictures of a brass board or a prototype or something that they can, see, because you don't get to talk with them once you're in the blackout period and things are submitted. Everything you must show them everything that you want to convey to them, okay? And so I often use pictures, tables of data results. I will show what the competition has done and pictures of what they are, and then why this mousetrap is better than that one. Does it offer a savings in weight, in performance, and cost? Does it better meet the requirement? Is it more rapidly something that can be provided to the customer? Things like that.
Dana, a couple of quick things to not include. Don't include a letter from your congressman. It sets the wrong tone for your proposal. That it basically says you should award this for political reasons, as opposed to this is a merit-driven pair of programs we're talking about here. Second of all, don't include marketing brochures or other general literature like that. And third, don't include appendices unless they are clearly allowed in the instructions. I had a NIH client recently have their phase 1 thrown back without even consideration because they had attached some things actually to their budget justification that the agency felt were a thinly veiled attempt to violate the page limits on the proposal, and they were trying to put it into these appendices. So those are things to avoid.
Okay, and so actually, Jim, kind of going back to, obviously don't ask for a letter from your congressman. Who should be included in terms of letters of support, or and maybe Meg too, if you could speak to this a little bit. What would you like to see as an agency in terms of support?
Personally, for the things that we look at, we're really looking at what is the technical merit. Letters of support don't do much for us personally, but that's something you can ask the point of contact in the pre-BAA period, is what are the kinds of things that they might be interested in seeing? Because why waste a page on a letter of support if that's not something they care about? On the other hand, you wouldn't want to omit it if that is something that particular community cares about. One thing, if this can go along with it, I often see in the commercialization plan where people see commercialization and they start going hardcore into commercialization other than the industry that has put the topic out there. We really like to see how you're going to transition it to our thing. And then by all means, every other possible use of your technology, awesome. But please do address how you would transition it to the platform that we've indicated is our hoped for target, and then everybody else in the world.
Right. Oh, that's great advice. And Jim, did you want to speak to that a little bit as well?
Yeah, and again, this shows the variability of the agencies. Whereas Meg says, the letters are not a big deal. NSF, they're paramount importance. At certain times in the past, NSF has mandated that you include letters of support to your proposal. Now they only strongly encourage them, which I think is about the same as telling you you have to do it. The letters they want to see, in my opinion, are from one of three sources: customers, potential funders, or potential licensees or strategic partners. They don't want to see letters of technical support because the reviewers in NSF feel pretty comfortable that they can evaluate the technical merits of your proposal, but they do like the help with seeing that there's commercialization opportunity here. So again, letter from potential customer, from a potential investor, and or letters from licensees or other strategic partners of the letters you want.
Okay, great. And any advice, I don't know, Dr. Goodman, if you've gone out and gotten letters before, of how to go about asking people if they would provide a letter of support? Do you draft that for them? What does that process look like?
So yeah, people's time is a valuable resource. I don't want people wasting mine, and I don't want to waste other people's. So it's always helpful to write a letter. Some large primes, I'll use an example, Lockheed Martin. They will publish a spreadsheet that includes the topics of interest. They'll include a person that you can email and contact, and once you contact them and tell them that you have an idea and you'd like support, they'll actually send you, well, it's a little more than a quad chart. I guess it's called a quint chart because it has 5 boxes in it, but they have a number of questions they want to answer. And once you submit that quint chart to them, then they want to set up a telecon that will last 30 minutes, and they will bring on subject matter experts from the business area for which the technology is needed, and that there's a requirement for the customer, in this case the government, that needs to be satisfied, and you'll do Q&A with them. And then if they like you, they'll give you a letter. Other primes do it differently. Government laboratories do it differently. But, some companies provide a template to you where you fill in the blank. But in most cases, I found that if you draft out something and say, hey, go ahead, put your spin on it, put your letterhead on it, and do that. But before you talk with these people, if you want to be cognizant of your intellectual property, you want to put a non-disclosure agreement in place, and you want to label in your email threads, this is company proprietary, protect yourself.
Right. That's great advice, Dr. Goodman. We're almost out of time, so I just wanted to say really quick, I can see a lot of questions here in the chat. If we didn't get to your question, we will be answering them and posting those after the summit today. And then just really quick, as kind of a closing, Dr. Goodman or Jim or Meg, do you have any kind of final remarks for the audience in terms of tips, tricks, best practices, anything like that before we sign off?
I would just like to say that we are so grateful for the small businesses and the passion and the power that they bring. A lot of times, if we're looking at something cutting edge, we want to go to SBIR, STTR to try to get that, because we know you guys are lean and mean and have great power in what you can bring to us. So be confident in that power, and we just hope that you match your power with the topics where that could be best realized.
Sonny Kreitman, who used to run NIH's program, used to tell the story of the guy that wanted to win the lottery. So he started praying to the lottery gods, and he'd pray to the lottery gods every day. And he prayed to the lottery gods. And one day he's praying to the lottery gods, and this booming voice from the heavens comes down and says, okay, but would you meet me halfway and at least buy a lottery ticket? Now, the relevancy here is you guys can attend the summit and listen to all these great presentations and get all enthused, but until you sit down and make a commitment to write a proposal, none of this is going to get you anywhere. It's like Bill says, you're procrastinating. You got to go through that pain, prepare a proposal, submit it. There's a real good chance it's going to get rejected. And you're going to pick yourself up, and you're going to read the comments, and you're going to be mad about some of those comments, but you're going to learn from them. You're going to write another proposal. You're going to submit that. And this may take a couple of 3 times, but you got to get started. You got to start buying the lottery ticket if you're going to succeed in SBIR, STTR. And again, many of you can succeed, but you're going to have to try, and then you're going to have to be perseverant in terms of trying again when you get kicked in the teeth or worse.
Right. Great advice, Jim. Dr. Goodman?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to what Jim said, there's no failure, there's only useful feedback. And that was one of the Edison things, you know, when he was asked about the light bulb and why he tried 10,000 times to do it, and even after he'd failed so many times, he got this strange look on his face. He says, I didn't ever fail, I just showed how not to do it. And you know, so if you don't win the first time, it doesn't mean that your idea is not good. It just means that someone wrote a better proposal than you did. And this is business, you know. In business, you're basically always swimming in shark-infested waters. You know, there are big sharks that just want to devour you. There are competitors that want to bleed you to death. There are people who want to steal your pirate's treasure, you know. And so you got to be vigilant. You have to be committed. You have to be focused. You have to be relentless. You have to make your business, this is a must-have. Not I'd like to have, not I should have, not I could have. It has to be a must-have. And you got to show up with a great attitude every day.
Yes. Great advice, Dr. Goodman. And really, we're not throwing you out to the sharks right by yourself. There's lots of resources, tools, organizations there to help you, regardless of what state you're in. If you're in New Mexico, please do reach out to us, or even if you're not in New Mexico, reach out to us and we can point you again in the right direction so that you can get that support as you go through this process. So again, thank you everybody for participating in this panel today. Del, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Yes.
All right.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Dana, and thank you, panelists, for being available and giving such a really great and insightful panel. So we're about to end this session, but up next is a very short break for everyone to go ahead and visit the exhibition hall and connect with some of those organizations and some of those potential funders from across the country. Visit the booths, talk to their staff members, set up a meeting, and just find out more. So we will be right back at our next panel will be at 11:15 Mountain here at the stage area. Just to cover one quick thing for everyone. Again, if for some reason you lose the stage, lose what's going on, we recommend hitting the lobby first and then going back to the stage. That will refresh it. If we are still talking in a panel and you get a message come up that says, Do you want to move on to the next session? Just stay in this current one. It should refresh. As everything, related to COVID right now, there are some technical issues going on, but we're working through them and we're hoping that you're enjoying the day. But take this break, relax, visit the expo hall, and talk to some of these organizations that can support you and can help you move forward. But we will be right back with our next panel that will talk about commercialization and how to move forward under that aspect. Thank you.
Thank you.